I'll be discussing beyond expertise, conceptions of giftedness as great performance. This is by Subotnik and Jarvin. This conception of giftedness rests on three premises. Firstly, according to Sternberg, abilities are forms of developing expertise. Secondly, according to Subotnik, the realm of elite talent exists beyond the level of expertise, which is what we call scholarly productivity or artistry, SPA. Thirdly, according to Subotnik, Jarvin, Moga, and Sternberg, transitioning between novice, expert, and beyond, key personality, ability, and skill factors become increasingly or decreasingly important. In this conception, abilities have interactive genetic and environmental components that are modifiable, meaning what's coming into your basic makeup, gifted-wise, genetically and environmentally, there's always an ability to change that based on outside or internal factors. These abilities are necessary for generating SPA, that scholarly productivity or artistry, but they're not necessarily sufficient. Giftedness and the potential to generate expertise or SPA changes dependent on your age. For example, giftedness is shown differently in the following stages. In the early stages, giftedness is shown as an efficient and in-depth development of ability into competence in a specific domain. So you're practicing based on these promising factors, and you slowly develop into competence in your area of giftedness. In the middle stages, this giftedness becomes a precocious achievement of expertise. You've been practicing for so long and suddenly you are skyrocketing above where your peers might be. In adulthood, giftedness takes the form of unique contributions to a field. This conception's focus is on music. So examples of the above are delineated in terms of musical growth and development. So as we go through the early stages, middle stages, and adulthood stages in Subotnik and Jarvin's conception of giftedness, we'll talk about the development in terms of musicality. Or not musicality, but in terms of musical giftedness development. Subotnik and Jarvin, through the lens of the development of musical giftedness, explore how abilities are developed into elite performances. The foundation of this developed elite talent can be found in an individual's abilities, competencies, and expertise. Extraordinary abilities tend to appear in one or two domains. Students who exhibit these extraordinary abilities need opportunities to learn from skilled instructors so they don't learn incorrect fingerings or aren't challenged musically. Skilled teachers provide the opportunity to turn abilities into competencies by providing scaffolded learning opportunities. As a student masters each level of their scaffolded learning, they become increasingly competent. Great teachers teach these students how to embrace adversity, developing persistence. A few definitions as we enter into discussion of the stages from abilities to scholarly productivity or artistry, SPA, are as follows. Expertise, derived from using one's ability to acquire, store, and utilize at least two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge from a domain or knowledge base, and knowledge from a field or social organization of that knowledge base. SPA, scholarly productivity or artistry. So as we're going through these levels of developing from abilities all the way to expertise, we're talking about using knowledge from a domain, that knowledge base, using knowledge from a field or social organization of that knowledge base, and developing into that scholarly productivity. The developed model of giftedness that happens here is shown in figure 9.1 on page 346, and it can be theoretically used to describe the path to eminence in most domains. It's been tested at 3 elite American conservatories with over 80 student interviews. And this is figure 9.1. It shows the age-specific growth between abilities. Right over here. Sorry. Spatial. Competencies and expertise in a domain. The age each step is attained depends greatly on the specific domain. So in this model of giftedness, in this developed model of giftedness, we're going to progress from abilities to competencies to expertise and to SPA, or that scholarly productivity artistry. And we'll begin with abilities. Initial abilities include intrinsic motivation, charisma, and musicality. Intrinsic motivation is the love of communicating through music, in spite of how difficult it is to make a living through music. Charisma, the ability to draw listeners to a performer either through his or her music or through the force of his personality. And musicality, the capability to communicate effectively through music. Once abilities are shown, you progress from abilities to competencies. With high-quality instruction, a child can develop these abilities into competencies. Instruction needs to emphasize exposure to and guided practice in a domain. Effectiveness of instruction is mediated by the following: how fast students can learn, technical proficiency the child can attain, which is dependent on the skill of the teacher and the child's commitment to practice, parental support or pressure, the child's teachability, i.e. the willingness and openness to being taught, which is considered by most highly expert teachers to be a very attractive quality in a new student. The quality of the student-teacher experience, the availability of external rewards such as praise and recognition, and persistence through good and bad times. At this stage of elite talent development, intrinsic motivation and musicality remain important factors. Then you progress from competency to expertise. Most young musicians enter conservatory highly competent. Instruction with an emphasis on technical proficiency is continually needed. The ability to learn quickly becomes less important. Mediating variables at this transitional stage are technical proficiency. In this stage, a relative flaw can be interesting, meaning the musician is developing their own individual voice musically, and they can have a relative technical flaw that makes them stand out from their peers. Parental support is definitely a mediating variable still at this stage. Also teachability, quality of the student-teacher experience, availability of external rewards, persistence through good and bad times, intrinsic motivation, and musicality. You'll see as the students are developing from these abilities to competencies to expertise, many of these mediating variables remain consistent and they develop in depth as the musical student progresses. While allowing recognition remains an important external reward, two others play a growing role in reinforcement as the musical student matures: the motivation of financial independence and opportunities to perform. Focusing full-time on musical achievement means acquiring gigs and being successful at those gigs and getting future work. So when you're competing at this level, you have this very, very real and visceral reinforcement of, I need to get my gigs, I need to perform higher than my peers, and I need to be more interesting than my peers in order to continually get hired. You're also looking at competing at a high level of achievement. And during conservatory years especially, this becomes a central expressive outlet for a musician's life. The more that you get higher up in that competition level, the more you're noticed and the more potential for gigs later in life. As students move towards competence, studio teachers analyze students' strengths and weaknesses, focusing on helping them improve on the latter, in order, again, to get to where they need to be as performers. There are new mediating variables that arise now. These include knowing the artist's own strengths and weaknesses, self-promotion, how to put yourself out there, learning how to play the game, learning how to be graceful in success and failure, and engendering a reputation as a professional. Social skills, which are vitally important, of course. Restoring self-confidence. As experiences become more difficult and opportunities fewer and harder fought, musicians need internal and external resources to work through frustration. That internal malleability of the artist that allows you to get through setbacks and progress forward is really vital in order to progress from expertise to that SPA stance, that scholarly productivity and artistry. Without that, you're stuck. You may be an expert, but you're not going to produce in your field because you're not going to be able to get over your own disappointment. That final stage is this last transition in the model, and that's from expertise to scholarly productivity or artistry. This transition relies on the opportunity for master teachers, agents, and other gatekeepers to impart their tacit knowledge and networking for students, to really guide them to hone what they've already gotten, and to kind of recognize that they see what those students are putting out there in order to reach these greater heights. Mediating variables at this transition include external rewards, persistence through good and bad times, intrinsic motivation, musicality, capitalizing on strengths, promotion through an agent, which helps ensure mastery of the game, mastering the game or refining one's own professionalism, social skills, and exuding that self-confidence that they have been building through the years. Technical proficiency, parental support, teachability, the quality of the student-teacher experience, they no longer play as influential role in talent development at this stage. There are still characteristics, though, for highly successful musicians, and it's builds from the persistence through good and bad times and intrinsic motivation. These additional characteristics that show themselves through this persistence and that are revealed through this intrinsic motivation are risk-taking and charisma. They really define the artist who's ready to leap forward over the artist who's not. Risk-taking is rather self-defining. It's the artist's ability to step forward despite potential danger and to take the opportunity that's given to them. Charisma is a key to success at the highest levels, and you can see it in two different ways when you think about an artist or musician you may have watched. Charisma is either the artist or the music itself. The first, that musician's going to draw them to you based on their presence, and the second is because of their performance. So that charisma is really, really like setting the bar high, or setting the tone for how that musician's going to come across, I should say. So that itself is the model of giftedness that was developed by Subotnik and Jarvin, this conception of giftedness beyond expertise. They also do some comparison studies, and I'm going to start by looking at how this conception of giftedness compares to other conceptions of giftedness. They compare with Bloom, Tannenbaum, and they compare with Gagne. So with Bloom, they noted his study of eminence in 6 fields to uncover the unique components of talent development. Excuse me for a moment. He developed a generalized model, including 3 stages. The first stage, recreational involvement within a domain. The middle stage, characterized by a special teacher's focus on technique, skill, and learning the rules of the domain. And the third stage, where the student will be guided by a teacher who focuses on the learner's unique qualities as a scholar or performer. This model is developmental and addresses elite talent, but it downplays the role of personality or social interaction. They say the data in this model isn't current, it's retroactive, and it diminishes the role of abilities in developing eminence. They also compare with Tannenbaum, who proposes that giftedness in childhood would translate into acclaimed performance or production of great ideas in adulthood, under the following conditions. G must be channeled into specific talent. Motivation and persistence need to be developed. Recognition and support need to be received from important stakeholders. The individual needs to be in the right place at the right time. Tannenbaum's view is domain-specific, and he highlights the importance of supportive teachers, family, and peers. Subotnik and Jarvin's model differs by substituting abilities for G. Outside the academic realm, general intelligence does not describe the ability associated with great performance. Gagne is talking about a multifaceted domain-specific approach to giftedness. He begins with abilities. He terms these giftedness, or aptitude domains. And he has 4 catalysts that transform these abilities either for the positive or the negative. Intrapersonal variables such as motivation and personality, environmental conditions, developmental processes, and chance factors. Subotnik and Jarvin support the role of these catalysts. In contrast, they assign weight to each variable at developmental level and pursue the eminence, or SPA, as their outcome. Gagne focuses on the transformation of giftedness or abilities into expertise in comparison. Subotnik and Jarvin also talk about how gifted individuals should be identified. Audition should be used for gifted identification, which can be most effectively assessed by artists and scholars. Portfolio-based assessments providing work samples are also highly valid. They stress that standardized ability tests are too limiting. Either they're too narrow, well, both they are too narrow and they're too broad. Abilities can be assessed at home and at school. But this is really family specific. If the family culture values the ability, it will be nurtured and grown. Otherwise, it may go unnoticed or be misinterpreted as strange or inappropriate. At school, students will either be encouraged by their teachers or more commonly receive no opportunity to display unusual responses to enriching material. And in this case, their ability will stagnate. Gifted individuals need to be instructed by specialized teachers. Instruction should develop abilities into competencies, expertise, and SBA. The teacher or mentor should provide opportunities to achieve the greatest potential for success. High-quality teaching is most important in the instruction of gifted individuals because teachers need to provide sufficiently challenging experiences that can hone abilities through practice into mastery. For assessment, giftedness should be assessed through examples of productivity. Abilities transform into competencies, which turn into expertise and finally into SBA. The age at which this happens is domain specific, so assessment should be domain specific and different as a student progresses from abilities to competence to expertise to SBA. A writer at 15 cannot be evaluated at the same level as a violinist at 15, for example. So assessment should really be domain specific. It should be developed within the domain. Thank you very much for listening. I was sincerely hoping to end on some Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin, but I can't seem to get my audio to pick up Rhapsody in Blue. So hopefully as I fade out, you can hear some Rhapsody in Blue playing in the background. You should Google it. Okay.